Hello, everyone, and good morning from Paris. A warm welcome to all of you, those being with us here in the magnificent Palais Brongniart, and also those watching from all around the world at your screens. This is the session on managing the fallout of the multi-crisis on populations, strengthening Eastern and Central Europe's resilience. My name is Nora Müller. I'm the Director of International Affairs at the Körber Stiftung in Berlin, and we're also a proud co-founding member of the Paris Peace Forum. Well, resilience. This is the buzzword that has been around for the past 2.5 or 3 years, I would say, all over Europe. We have the COVID pandemic, we have the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine, and we have also the looming climate crisis. And all of these have shown that we really have to strengthen our resilience and that we also have to work on preparedness for future crises to come. Now, what we're going to do today is zoom in on Eastern Europe and on the Western Balkans, and many of those countries have been first responders when it comes especially to the war in Ukraine, but they're also very heavily affected when it comes to the repercussions of this terrible war. So today, we want to talk about ways how to strengthen resilience, especially when it comes to populations and civil societies. And I am thrilled to be joined by a great panel here with us in Paris. Please let me welcome very cordially here to my left, Edi Rama, Prime Minister of Albania since 2013, not only a politician, but also an artist, a great sportsman, a poet, a philosopher. So you will know. Also here with us today is Dritan Abazovic, the caretaker prime minister, I should say, of Montenegro, in that position since 2022, April 2022, and if I may say so, also the youngest serving head of government worldwide. Good to have you with us, Dritan. I am also very happy to be joined here by Alexander Soros. Alexander is the Deputy Chairman of the Open Society Foundations and also a great expert on all matters Central and Eastern Europe. Good to have you with us, Alex. And last, but certainly not least, I am very happy and delighted to have Marie Dumoulin with us. Marie is the director of the Wider Europe program at the European Council on Foreign Relations here in Paris. She is a French diplomat gone think tanker, and she's also a member of the Weimar Task Force on the future of European security, and what that exactly is, I will tell you all later on. So thank you all for being here. Thank you all. And before we start, I will just say that time is of the essence today. So we all have to be very concise. We only have 45 minutes. We will have a discussion here on that panel, and then we will reserve 15 to maybe 10 to 15 minutes for your questions here from the audience as well. So, Prime Minister Rama, let me start with you. What we see currently in the Western Balkans is soaring inflation. We see fears of food shortages. There are even concerns when it comes to social unrest. So bottom line, I would say, is the fallout of what's currently going on in Ukraine is that the poor countries are even getting poorer. And your country, Albania, is a beautiful country, but it's also one of the poorest countries in Europe still. So I wonder, what does the current situation, this multiplicity of crises, what does it mean for the development path of your part of the world? I mean, there was always the ambition of closing the economic divide vis-a-vis the EU, for example, rather than making it broader. And what we see at the moment is that the divide is getting broader, right?
First of all, thank you for having us here. And just one advice: if you want concise meetings, never invite people from the Balkans.
I know you can do great,
Yeah.
so I'm not worried.
So just keep it in mind for next. And now talking about your many topics, I would say that first of all, the war in Ukraine is not meant to be just an aggression on Ukraine, but is meant to be a war on the West, on all the western flank of Russia. And the bet of Vladimir Putin is not only to get from Ukraine territories, but also to disrupt the checks and balances of our societies. And we are, although not the most important part of the Western world, still part of the Western world. And so there are two very, very scary weapons of this war on us, the West. On one hand, the energy price, and on the other hand, the inflation. And for sure, when it comes to countries like ours that do not have as much capacities and as big countries, this is of course a problem. But this being said, I must tell you that on one hand we have succeeded to keep the energy price intact.
By caps, you practically cap.
No, just intact.
Okay.
By not touching it. So for families and for small business. So families and small business in Albania pay the same price than before. And of course, we are putting a lot of money to subsidize the gap. And this is important also on the inflation side, because thanks to that, we have the lowest inflation in the region. It's still hurting, by no doubt, but it's not hurting as much as it could hurt in case we would touch the electricity price. For the rest, I think Dritan, as a caretaker, knows more about how to take care, and I'm sure he'll be as concise as me, or even more concise.
I have to say, I'm very impressed. Thank you very much. Prime Minister Abazovic, Dritan, if I could ask a follow-on question, from a Montenegrin point of view, how do you deal with the current crisis in terms of energy prices, in terms of food prices? What kind of recipes do you have?
So, first of all, thank you very much for the opportunity. For me, it's a great pleasure. I think that your choice topic is very good. And in this moment, maybe things are not looking so well, nowhere, including Western Balkan, but from my point of view, I am not pessimistic at all, and I think that the Western Balkan is the part of the world, and especially part of the Europe, which have the huge opportunity to develop in the next period if we will have the smart and good decision and good decision makers. This is be very optimistic. About current situation, yes, it's true. I will talk about Montenegro, just a few questions. So after the aggression of Russia Federation in our country, which have the negative Russia influence historically, it's not something new. That's make a big problem. Why? Our country is a lot to depend from tourism. 25% of our incomes are from tourism. direct.
Russia, if I may add, Dritan, is
And
the greatest
Russia make,
provider
yes,
of FDI,
Russia
right?
make 20% of our touristic market. So this year it was important to replace, or in huge number to replace that market, which is now unfortunately it's not existing. And from my point of view, we make the very good things. We have the very good touristic season. We open the new markets, and in this moment, in our country, crisis is still under the control, and it's not with some huge shocks, including energy. If you look at the energy sector, Montenegro is one of the few countries in Europe which not raise the price of electricity power. So we have the same price like 2 years ago. With this, we have the import of electricity during the summer, which is the problem for us. But with this, we decide to support our population, also to support the business during the summer, during the touristic season. So if we will have the raining season good, because we producing a lot of hydro, we will not have the problem in 2023. But if this meteorology keep like this, it can be the problem, because we now don't have the raining days in the country. But what I wanted to mention, like for the conclusion, yes, it is the big mess everywhere. But for our countries, I hope that also my brother Eddie will agree with this. It's very important that EU should understand that we need to relive enlargement process. If we will stay like a black hole in the Europe, that will open the possibility today maybe for Russia, tomorrow maybe for some third side to make the negative impact. So our common future is in EU, and yes, we need to finish our part of the job, but I think that it needs to be more sensibility also from the Brussels, also from the European countries, to finally relive enlargement process and to keep EU attractive for the country which want to join the club.
I think that's a very important point, Dritan. But let me push you a little further on the issue of Russia and the kind of influence it still has on political decision-making in the Western Balkans. When I read up for this conversation, I saw that the issue of sanctions against Russia that Montenegro, I think, joined was hugely controversial in your own country. So, I mean, there's no denying that Russia does have some form of political influence, right? So how do you deal with that?
It was the problem to make the sanction before we get the government. When we started, when I come to the cabinet, it was not problem anymore. So we go deeply in the sanction against Russia Federation. This is not because we have, let's say, something against some countries. We protect the principles. This is, and we don't want to put in principles in the understanding of economy. We decide to protect international law. We decide to protect the sovereignty of Ukrainian people. We decide to protect the possibility, right of the people to choose the way how they want to live and in which organization they want to be. So we decide to go deeply in the sanction. Our political relation with Russia, which was in previous period pretty good, let's say pretty good, now are on zero or under the zero. We excommunicate 8 diplomats from the country. We have 3 or 4 action against spying activity against the Russia Federation. And of course, we paying the political price for that, also economical price, but we want to be the trust partner. Yes, it's true that we are a small country, which capacity is not so huge, but also the rule of the small countries, especially in this kind of situation, when we have the war, can be very crucial. So I'm inviting everybody to be more solidar, because solidarity can bring us to the peace, this is first, and can bring us to the more democratic understanding of international relation. I hope that this will understand also Russia, and will understand that any kind of aggression in 21st century, in 2022, it's not the option. War, violence is not the option. We need to use another tools, diplomacy, negotiation, dialogue, everything to fix the problem, not only in the east of the Europe, but everywhere when we have some kind of problem.
And I think we would all agree on that final point. Alex, OSF, the Open Society Foundation, is very active when it comes to strengthening civil societies, independent media, rule of law in the countries of Central and Eastern Europe. From your point of view, what can an organization like yours do in the current situation, which has so many pressures on these countries, to really strengthen societal resilience and make civil societies stronger, also in the face of adverse influences from the outside, i.e. by Russia?
I
think we can hear you.
Working?
Yeah, yeah, it works.
Okay. Well, I think we can speak from a certain experience because the Open Society Foundations were present in former Yugoslavia before the war there, and we're now present in Ukraine since before Ukraine even went independent from the Soviet Union, before the dissolution of the Soviet Union. I don't want to glorify philanthropy and being able to do certain things which only nation states and security arrangements can do. With that said, we have a precedent in Bosnia where the actions of my father were able to help Sarajevo in a way which the international community wasn't able to do. In Ukraine at the moment, we are helping civil society organizations stay alive, and a lot of them are going into more humanitarian work, but also, still doing journalism, and still and investigating various crimes that have been committed by Putin and his military. I don't want to get into this bifurcation of us as some proxy against Russia. Perhaps Putin's philanthropy, but at the same time, perhaps perhaps Russia's been more effective in their propaganda than in us allowing people to believe in open society and democracy, given some of the trends you see in Eastern Europe. And the region. But with that said, I think that what we're seeing in the Western Balkans, particularly what we've seen in Albania, which is a country which I think was described earlier as a poor country, but Albania has come farther. I think that any country in Europe, if you look at where it came from, it was the North Korea of Europe, and I think it's a place where that has also seen refugees. It's seen Kosovars fleeing war crimes, and I was in Tirana last year, a week after the invasion, and it was like being in Ukraine. The resonance was these people felt as if they would take in any Ukrainian, and I mention that because it's a place where we've been, I think, the most. Some of the sorry, it's very loud. One of the most impactful, also because we've had great leadership, and I'm sitting next to two men that have taken great courage in saying, what, we're gonna stop division and sign up to a program here and bring our region closer to Europe, even though Europe may not want to have us. And I think it needs to be acknowledged, And I want to say to Eddie and Dritan that I think what you're doing is courageous and it's great that you came to Paris, and that the Open Balkan platform, which they're pushing, which is bringing the Balkans closer to Europe, and also more aligned with Europe on foreign policy, is great, and that it should be acknowledged. Thanks.
Thank you, Alex. And if I can just ask a quick follow-on question, what is, from your point of view, from the point of view of a philanthropic organization, what is the single greatest challenge that you face at the moment when it comes to trying to strengthen civil societies in Central and Eastern European, including the Western Balkans countries? Can you pinpoint like the one single challenge that is the sort of the most difficult for you?
Well, I think when you're kicked out of a country, it becomes difficult.
It does become difficult, yeah. So it's shrinking spaces.
And that's happened to us. I mean, you know, if you consider, we used to be active in Russia, and we got kicked out. You know, and we used to be active in Turkey, and we have people there under arrest. Same thing, you know, and so I think that is the single hardest thing, to be active when you're considered an enemy.
So yeah, that's an important point, and we'll come back to the issue of sort of democratic backsliding. But Marie, I wanted to sort of confront you with a quote which I found enlightening from a report that the CSIS in Washington just put on the table, saying that, again, zooming in on the Western Balkans, that the Western Balkans could turn into a new source of unrest in an already shattered continent in light of the current, multiplicity of crises. Is that an analysis that from your point of view, you would share?
I think when considering the impact of the war, we need to consider three levels, and that's not only for the Western Balkans. It's true also for Eastern Europe, but also for EU countries. The first level is a domestic level. The war has shown as how such basic things as food prices, energy, information, migrations, you name it, can be used to destabilize, put pressure on a country, and can be used by external actors to increase their leverage on this number of EU countries. So it's an important challenge that all of us need to be aware of. We have to work on our own resilience, social cohesion, to make sure that we don't give external actors a possibility to use our weaknesses to destabilize, increase their influence, etc. The second level is, of course, what we see most for the Western Balkans, but it's also true for other parts of the wider region. It's a regional level. There are a number of unsettled conflicts or abnormal situations on which we need to enhance our efforts to come to a settlement or normalization. I think, of course, of the situation between Serbia and Kosovo, but as I said, it's true for other parts of the wider region. There are conflicts that can be used again to destabilize the wider region, and we should not let that be that way. And the third level has already been mentioned. It's a relationship between the EU and non-EU countries in the region and the enlargement process. The fact that now Ukraine and Moldova are candidate countries to EU membership, it needs to be used as a new momentum for the enlargement process, to give it a new impulse and the frustrations that this process has been generating in the Western Balkans especially, move forward more decisively with this process, because it's also an issue for European security. And in this perspective, I think it's the awareness is there, and the fact that 44 European countries, EU and non-EU, gathered in Prague a few weeks ago to discuss all these issues of resilience, peace and security, enlargement, and relation between EU and non-EU countries in the framework of the European political community. This is a great opportunity to move forward with all these challenges on an equal footing among all European countries.
Right, but what worries me is when we talk about sort of the EU enlargement process for the Western Balkans countries, is that the credibility of this process in the region is at an all-time low. So that in combination with all the economic pressures and the downturn that we've been seeing, isn't that a pretty toxic mixture when it comes to the European perspective of the Western Balkans? Maybe that's a question that I can throw into your court, Edi Rama. Sorry? No, I mean, if we have a population that is in the process of losing faith in the enlargement process, plus we have, you know, all these economic pressures on the region, so that's not a good mixture, right? When we look at the, you know, the European perspective of the Western Balkans.
I don't know. Maybe Dritan can answer better to this, because when it comes to Albanians, we are very particular people. We are very loyal to empires. So we were the very last to leave the Ottoman Empire when even the Ottomans decided it was not worth anymore. And then we were very last to give up on Stalin even after the Soviets thought it was not worth anymore. And then we were the very last to give up on Chairman Mao when the Chinese thought it was not worth anymore. So we'll be the very last to give up on the European Union, even when all Europeans will think it's not worth anymore. So our...
Thank you for spreading that sense of optimism.
Our notion of faith is very much connected to a notion of loyalty and to a notion of being there until the end of the days. So Albania is a bit like this Japanese soldier that continued to fight his own war after the war was over. This being said, of course, we have our own frustrations, by no doubt. But we have also a particular situation compared to others, because we never ever in our history had the chance to have a say on where we wanted to go and with whom we wanted to be. And this is the first time. It's the first time. So people want to be in the European Union and be part of Europe because they feel that this is the only place where we are safe from another regime. So before, for centuries, regimes, ideologies, all type of crazy people decided about us. This time, we have made a decision. Of course, we have made a decision in our own. When we went in the streets and thought it was a good idea to overthrow the regime and look forward to the European Union, we didn't ask the Europeans if they agreed with that. And now we are having all this path of integration, finding out with what they agree, what they don't agree, how we agree. But finally, at least we have started the accession talks. So finally, we can say they want to marry us and they are talking to us. Because until a few time ago, it was, we want to marry you, but we are not ready to talk to you. So how one can marry without talking? This was the big drama European Union put in front of us. Now they are talking to us. Of course, it will take long, but we are resilient, as I said. So only if they give up on the European Union, we will not be in the European Union. Otherwise, we'll be there no matter what.
Trujan, do you share that sense of
no,
cautious optimism?
No, he doesn't share because he's Albanian, but from Montenegro, so they have different story.
I let's say, Eddie explained very well the situation, but we should not talk too much. We should feel the energy. So if we want to marry it, we should feel the energy. Of course, we need to talk. Of course, we need to have some negotiation, some agreement about our common future, but we need to feel the energy. And this is something which is two-way street. It's not only something which is interest of our countries. I think this is two-way street. I think this is interest also of EU. Maybe we're giving too much credibility to our countries, but EU without Western Balkan, it's not complete. They already lose one member. So Great Britain decide to go out, which is okay, legitimate thing. I think that EU should keep open attractivity, should have new members, should explain to everybody in the global politics, in the global society, that this is organization which is very productive, very democratic, and which countries want to join. This is. So I'm very happy because of Albania, because of North Macedonia, a lot of problems. I hope things will be good with Kosovo about visa liberalization. They waiting a lot. Bosnia and Herzegovina, another story. Also Montenegro, Serbia. So we only, if we see the common future, that will be good, because we are in this moment front runners in EU way. But for us, it's incredibly important because we are the smallest country with the population. For us, it's incredibly important to be part of the NATO and part of EU. So Eddie told something about that. So it's very, very important. But we don't want to be there and to have the problem somewhere in the neighborhood. I think also Albania don't want that. I think also Kosovo don't want that. Serbia, Bosnia. So we want to see common future in Europe. And I think that we can give the positive impact. Why? Because I want to let's say, to defend a little bit. Yes, you say maybe some of the countries is poorest or not. I don't know exactly what is the statistic in Europe. I don't think that this is right, but doesn't matter. We are not in some, let's say, highway, unfortunately. But definitely, if you look what's happened in our region 20 years ago, and what is the situation today, it's really, really better. Yes, there are a lot of problems, there are a lot of issues, but there are a lot of opportunities. So I think that we missed a lot of chance in the past. I think that we now need to score. Finally need to shut the penalty and to score the goal. I think this for all the region, of course for Montenegro in first.
That message is taken, Dritan. Marie, as a former French diplomat, or a sort of a diplomat on leave, if I may say so, we see this and we hear this great sense of optimism from our friends from the Western Balkans when it comes to EU integration. How do you see that from a European point of view? Do you share that optimism?
Well, the messages are very positive that we hear both from Berlin, from Paris, and from other EU capitals. There is an awareness that the way enlargement has been done up until now cannot be continued in the same way, precisely because it has created frustrations, and also it has impacted the credibility of the process itself, which is not something we can live with, because if the process is not credible anymore, it loses its transformative power. I think the awareness is there. The question is, what do you do with this awareness, and how do you make sure that you really give the impulse to the process that is needed now? The opening of negotiations with a number of countries was the first step. Visa liberalization with Kosovo would definitely be something important to show that when a country meets the criteria that have been set, the decision is taken, and the decision is now overdue. It remains to be seen whether the EU machinery can live up to the expectation of a more dynamic process.
That does remain to be seen. And for now, I would make a full stop here and thank the panel. I promise to the audience to give you the opportunity to speak and to ask questions. Now would be the time. Please be very, very concise and very brief. Quickly say who you are. And with this, the floor is open to your questions, your comments. I see a lot of smiling faces. As of yet, no hands up in the air. If you need some more time to think. Oh, Lucy, here in the first row.
Yes, thank you very much. My question is for Mr. Abasovic. Nora said you're the youngest head of government in the world. I've read that you also worked as a high school teacher for a while. My question is, what are your hopes for the youth of Montenegro and of Western Balkans, and how to include them in the discussion now? What do they want? How do you make them resilient and prepared for future crises?
Thanks for a great question.
Thank you very much for the question. I will try to just give my opinion in some another thesis. Yes, I am maybe young, maybe not, but this is not important. In Western Balkan, what I think, and especially in Montenegro, I think that we need the people in decision-making process. We need the leadership, which is new with ideas. It is not the question of age. So we need the people who have new ideas, who don't have this baggage from the 90s, who are not contaminated with the nationalism, who are not contaminated with the corruption, with organized crime, and with some kind of frustration when they don't want to see that they have possibility to build the bridges with others. So this is not the question of age. It's the question of, are we giving something new to the political life, or we coming like a new face, young people with old ideas? Maybe it's better to have the old people with new ideas than to have young people with old ideas. And always I try to, when I talk with my colleagues, I say, coming with the new idea, we need the refreshing. In Montenegro, definitely, I think that this process is starting refreshing. People which don't have this baggage, especially from the 90s. Especially from the 90s. That if you coming and now speaking the story from 90s, we have the problem with Serbia, with church, Albanians, Bosniaks, Kosovars. We don't want this, don't want this. Everybody's fault. No cooperation. No, don't want this. For me, this is not acceptable. I think that if we truly want to make some impact of European spirit in our society, we need to understand our history. We need to be very critical about what's happened in our areas, but also to move on, to see how we can make the bridges with each other and move forward.
Alex, let me maybe pass the baton to you and ask, what can an organization like OSF do to instill that, what Dritan called the European spirit in those societies, civil societies in the Western Balkans countries?
Well, I think it was apt of Dritan not to speak of too much about young people in the Western Balkans, because they're a minority group, as they are in a lot of Europe, partially because of brain drain. Kosovo and Albania being exceptions to that rule for various reasons. I think there's a question, and that is, what do we mean by Europe? When you look at countries like Hungary and Poland, and even if you take the narrative from the war in Ukraine, I would push back on the notion that we are necessarily just talking about democratic values and human rights. I think the notion of national sovereignty is as much a history of the European project since the fall of the wall as as the nice liberal values that definitely everybody on the panel agrees with, but that's not necessarily what those in Poland and Hungary and other European countries feel. What I like about the European political community idea is that it's the least realistic. It's not saying we have necessarily shared values, but we need a format in which we all can talk, because we're here in the same sphere, in the same area, and we're not going to have a format in which we're going to lie to countries and say one day you're going to get into the European Union, but you're never really going to get into the European Union. But we're going to give you this process anyway. With that, so I think it's a question for Europe, because also the whole process of integrating the Western Balkans was also predicated, and it's been said by the French president as well, on Europe reforming itself. Where are Europe's reforms? Are we getting rid of the foreign policy veto? Are we North Macedonia was hijacked by Bulgaria while the Ukrainian war was going on. This still hasn't actually ended in North Macedonia, because they need to pass votes in parliament, in order to actually get to the final point of getting chapters. So I think that for the European Union itself, these issues are crucial of what it stands for.
Thank you. Well, last chance for you to ask a question. We have 4 minutes to go. I see a raised hand over there. The mic is coming your way.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Can you?
You go ahead.
Okay. In the context of the Belt and Road Initiative, China has made great investments in the West Balkans. I can think especially of an example of a big highway in Montenegro. Do you think that this kind of foreign presence could be seen as sort of ambiguous in the context of European integration?
Who would like to answer?
It's about Belt and Road. It's about, but yeah. I mean, I'll let them speak, but I just want to say, I think it's one thing that we've seen across the world is that China has refrained from Belt and Road rhetoric for about the past 2 or 3 years. It's as if I'm not saying that, Chinese foreign policy isn't still there. I'm not saying that, there isn't, interference in other countries. But this concept of Belt and Road is not in the rhetoric of Chinese foreign policy anymore. And so, and it's something I think that really needs to be taken, that really needs to be understood. I'm not saying that China is not doing certain things. I'm just saying that this rhetoric of Belt and Road, is gone. And then also, I think, it's, people complain about China, about this, China plus 16, which I think all Western Balkan countries get invited to. And I say this partly as an American. We cannot be like the Russians when the Marshall Plan was being introduced, which is saying, don't take the funding, but we're not offering you anything in return. Mm-hmm. So we need to come with an alternative and a better package. But I know you have more intimate.
Maybe Dritan and Eddie Rama with a quick final statement.
Very short, because Alex explained everything very well. So if we don't want to have the Chinese loans or Chinese credits or Chinese which making or building the highways or bridges or infrastructure, we need to have the alternative, because we need highways. This is mobility and access is very important for reconciliation in Western Balkan. Extremely important. When we have mobility and access, we will have reconciliation. When we have reconciliation, we will have economical development. This is the algorithm.
Eddie Rama has the final word, as always.
No, I think that beyond the daily struggles and the daily discussions, there is something new also that is happening, which is the breakthrough finally of this French idea of the European political community that has been, tried several times. And I'm not going to start with Abbé de Saint-Pierre, but I'd mention Mitterrand, I would mention Sarkozy, and now this is a really important step that all the Europeans, despite being EU or just E, they gathered in Prague and they started discussion. Why I'm bringing it here? Because of what Dritan said. We need to be more and more able to have a conversation independently from the dynamics within the member states or within the Balkan states or between Balkan states and between member states, and struggles that have damaged a lot the whole idea of the European Union and of Europe and so on, because of elections being more and more important and getting the upper hand on strategy and on values and principles. So I hope that this European political community will materialize in more concrete common action when it comes to common challenges. So we should not expect, or we should not need a war to realize that we have to act together, or we should not need a pandemic to realize that we have to get together and then suffer exactly the unpreparedness. We need to kind of be ahead of events and set a number of common goals that are really common and where there is no distinction between EU or E, and look forward to bring as much as possible things together in terms of action. Because it's easy to say the Balkans are, we need the Balkans, because otherwise the Chinese, the Russians, the Turks will take the Balkans, or the Arabs, or I don't know, the Martians, which is the most probable. But when it comes to the real thing, there is a pandemic, there are vaccines, and guess what? Without the Chinese, the Russians, and the Turks, the Balkans would not have survived the first wave, because the European Unionists were within themselves struggling who will get more vaccines, and running at home within their states, like the people running at home to protect from the virus. So this is why we need to strengthen this European political community, because the European integration will continue to be defined by elections here, elections there, marine here, and mountain there. So this is how I see it.
Perfect. Thank you very much. This has been a great conversation. By the way, my first foreign policy conversation in which the Martians figured. So it was great to have you all here on this panel. Thank you very much for attending this session. I wish us all a successful continuation of the Paris Peace Forum. Stick around, and thank you very much again.